for this session. This is how can inclusion drive economic growth? It's a very big question, particularly at this time. It's always been a big question, but never more so, in the light of sort of topical events of the past sort of few weeks. We've all seen all this on our screens on a pretty much a daily basis. So what I'd like to do is to ask you all, basically. I'm not going to try and tell everyone what you do. You're going to tell them yourself. You're your best mouthpieces and representatives. So I'll introduce you all. And as you see, go around the screen, we've got Janet Anya, again, all three members of the tech community, three founders working in different ways. Janet Anya, Tolulope Ogunremi, and Tom Adiola. Let's just jump straight in. If I could say, I work down in South Wales, in Cardiff, very big, multicultural, diverse area. We're in the heart of Wales's most diverse ward here in Grangetown in Cardiff. So I'm very interested in this and how we can actually get better representation of that community into the tech community. So you've all got different experiences of this. Perhaps I start with you, Janet. Start with your experience. If you could tell us a bit about who you are, the fact that you work in a big organization, but you're also a founder of a small tech startup. Perhaps you could just tell us who you are and what you do.
Lovely. Thank you for that introduction, Mark. And thank you all as well for being part of this session, for choosing this session, because it really means that you want to know more about how you can use inclusion positively in tech. And before I forget, please do share what you take from this to others who didn't come to this session, because I know there are some great things going on at the same time. I'm Janet Anya, and I currently work as a technology and business integration architect for Accenture. I'm based in Edinburgh in Scotland and have been for more than a decade now, and I absolutely love it here, even if it is a little bit cold, but I guess that's what makes it great. My background is actually as a functional project and delivery manager, but over the last 8 years or so, I've been able to build more technical skills in order to help with delivery. As Mark mentioned, I'm also a tech founder, a couple of fledgling startups in the very early stages now, one which is TivityPod, a platform for listing and booking kids' activities, and the second one, Fife Lockdown Economy, which is again another marketplace to connect local people with the offers that local businesses and independent businesses currently have to help them gain some traction during these difficult times. So that is me. One of the things I'm passionate about is regionalism, and the fact that not everything happens in London, although I love London, especially as part of tech as well. And I just want other young Black, ethnic minority women with families, things like that, to just see and know that within tech they can make a positive difference. Thank you.
So I think you're also previously based in the north of England as well. So you've seen various different areas of the UK there, Janet. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about that later, about the difference between a startup and the working in a large, prime type organization like Accenture. It's an interesting mix. Tolulope, you again a founder of an extremely interesting organization that we're very keen to actually help develop. Tell us a bit about Coders of Colour, Tolulope.
Absolutely, sure. I will echo what Janet said and say thank you to everyone that's attended this session today, taken the initiative to come and learn from people about including others, especially given everything that's gone on recently. So my name is Tolulope Ogunremi, and I am the founder of Coders of Colour, which is a not-for-profit organisation aimed at getting young, underrepresented people of colour into tech, mainly through hands-on coding workshops. During the current global pandemic, we've moved online, so we've kind of gone somewhat global with our events, just naturally, since everything's taking place online. But it's mainly just about getting people, young people that look like me, into tech, but also giving them role models and people that they can look up to, and letting them know that tech is for them, and equipping them with that information as well as skills early on enough so that they can pursue it as much or as little as they want to. That being said as well, some people may just want to have a taste of coding and may not have the best kind of computer science education in their school, and so are given a bad image of what coding or being a developer is like. So even just giving young people the autonomy to say that, do you know what, they've tried it and they don't like it, is also really important for us as well. Based in London usually when you know we all meet each other in real life, so very kind of right in the center of where everything happens, but we are looking to work with other regional bases and kind of collaborate in that way.
That's again what's extremely interesting, like a day like today, where we can have the whole of the UK coming together around the different nations and regions and find so many different opportunities, if you like, for you to look to extend that network into areas, you know, outside London, that to work with people like the UK Tech Cluster Group, but many of the people on this session now who would be able to think of ways that they could actually work with you to extend that network. So again, sorry, we will come back to that in a second. So Tom, if I could introduce you again, well, you'll tell us who you are, but very experienced in both building organizations, building companies, exiting very successfully as well. So you're an investor as well as a founder, but you've also got an extremely pertinent role within Extended Ventures. So perhaps you can tell us a bit about your background, Tom, and where you sit in all this.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a technology entrepreneur. I think I was lucky enough to work in 5 startups going all the way back to 1998. Before eventually starting my own, which was a fashion technology startup called Metail, which I founded in 2008 and sold and exited this time last year. So since then, I've been focused on positive society and climate related projects. I currently sit on 4 boards, the board of a zero carbon monitoring consultancy, an environmental behavioral change platform, a charity focused at helping BAME individuals progress through the creative industries. So that's Verco, DoNation, EV360. And I've just done an angel investment into a mindfulness app focused at young people through music and spoken word. And then I think that the main one in this particular area is I've co-founded Extend Ventures, which is focused on democratizing access to finance. So I was lucky enough, having gone to a great school and on to Cambridge, to sort of develop a network that has enabled me to raise money for my business. Over the course of Metail, I raised over £25 million before exit. And I recognize that the journey that I've had isn't common to a lot of other people. So I've been looking in particular at how to sort of bust open the funnel, if you like, to diverse and underrepresented groups, to enable them to get access to finance easier, quicker, better, earlier, and get past what are traditionally very closed venture capital networks, which are difficult for both ethnic minorities and anybody from the regions. So I think this period of COVID has sort of enabled the likes of myself from London to turn up an event in Cardiff. And also, you know, a few days ago, I turned up in Belfast for some startup pitches, and this morning mentored somebody in Bristol. So, you know, if anything, if this helps sort of, you know, bust open the funnel for diversity and inclusion, I think this could be a silver lining that comes out of this sort of tragic course of events that we've had over the last few months.
You've been some data mining, haven't you, Tom, into some of the data around this, that again, just to provide some context, you know, we are all very supportive of the stuff that Dom Hallis had done at Kodak around Save Our Startups, the SOS campaign. But I think some of the data, once you interrogated, that you found there was a massive underrepresentation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think when I saw that campaign start, my fear was that there was a lack of diverse voices around the table, in terms of making sure that as we put out new support mechanisms, that businesses that have been traditionally locked out get accounted for. So we're doing a 9-month research study, which is going to be looking at the last 10 years of businesses and using computer vision and machine learning to overlay ethnicity. So basically we'll be finding all the businesses, we'll be going to company's house, find all the directors, and then basically crawling the internet to find images and then assigning ethnicity over the top. So we'll finally be able to basically overlay the sense of performance for ethnic minority businesses. So that's our long project, which we've now got support from the likes of TechNation, Innovate UK, Capital Enterprise on. But there's a shorter urgent need now. And so we rushed out some surveys to understand how Black and ethnic minority businesses were coping through this crisis. And we saw that I think it was 48% of businesses hadn't applied or didn't feel they would qualify for government measures. So there's this sense of, you know, businesses were very highly bootstrapped. They were in general quite young. So it was an emerging cohort of businesses sort of entering into the sort of tech startup space that were a critical juncture where, you know, pretty much this period could snuff them out. So it was very important that to shine a light on this and try and dedicate support. So we've done now a couple of pieces. So we had a piece out in the Times around that report, and subsequently joined up with the Ubele initiative to send out a letter to Rishi Sunak and the Chancellor for extended measures, which was also in the Times yesterday.
Yeah. I think that what you found there was probably what a lot of people would have expected, you know, that underrepresentation. I'm just interested, perhaps Janet, is that something that you would have also experienced firsthand, that, you know, this idea that there's even perhaps a lack of confidence to be able to push forwards of young entrepreneurs from the BAME community? You're muted, Janet. Hello? Top right-hand corner, you should be able to unmute. Sorry, we can't, we'll try and sort that out for you, Janet. I just wanted to tell you, Lope, if, again, that idea of providing role models for young people, both, if you like, as individuals, but to be able to start companies, is that something you think that you could be encouraging as much as possible?
Yes, absolutely. I think when I was younger, I didn't see anyone that was in their 20s or 30s that looked like me that worked in tech. And I think that's really important to have, not because they don't exist, they do exist, they're just not made visible. And it's very powerful to just have someone that looks like you, and there's a real subconscious kind of connection with your ability to achieve something if there's somebody that looks like you there. But in the same with entrepreneurship, is there a Black female version of Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg? No, there isn't. Are we going to get there one day? I hope so. But small things like that can, and I think people have even said if you Google CEO, it's a very homogenous kind of result on Google Images. And so just having role models and letting young people know that they can get there. And also those role models. So we've just finished like a series of interviews with people of color that work in tech. And the people that attended the events felt like they could ask questions and felt like they could be, quote unquote, real with the people by just asking, okay, what is it really like? How do you feel? How best did you do X, Y, and Z? So I think it's really, really important.
What are some of the practical ways in which you achieve that? Is it sort of slowly growing your network, or do you think there are ways of doing this perhaps at a greater scale that would have a quicker effect, if you like, and a greater impact?
For myself, it was slowly growing my network. I think in the tech scene in London, it's quite easy to do something like that. In order to scale, it would just be having more of a reach, speaking at events like this where people are from so many different regions in the UK, and also probably working to change things from the top down in some way. Specifics on that, I'm probably not the best person to ask, but there are definitely ways to do this at a scale, but it's really important to find these people first.
Janet, I'm not sure if you're back on mic now. If you could let us know. It's very interesting how that works. Also, you straddle two camps. You're both a founder with a small startup, but you're also working in a large organization. Oh, Janet's just popped away. I'll come back to that in that case. I was wondering, Tom, in that case, how we might be able to achieve that sort of representation, which seems to be lacking at the moment. Is it about creating role models, as Tony Loppy has indicated, and some of the we've also had some of that coming through on some of the chat. Is that the best way, or does it need sort of, if you like, macro measures, other levers that can achieve this?
I think absolutely the best thing is around having role models and creating virtuous circles. So, if I think back to when I started Metail back in 2008, that was pre the government having any knowledge that there was a bunch of tech startups that were based around the Shoreditch area. So, then there was a study done that showed there were lots of startups around, the coining of Silicon Roundabout, and the government shining a spotlight on the area. And at that time, we didn't have a single tech startup that had achieved any sort of unicorn status. The infrastructure was terrible. There were rolling power cuts in the area. I had to get satellite direct line of sight to get Wi-Fi. The stuff was very early. So when I then think forward, fast forward to now, where we've got actual genuine big successful unicorn companies coming through, that is now the beginning of a virtuous circle, where you're then having those names starting to angel invest into the bottom and providing that sort of role model basis. The launch of Tech City, I remember being so angry and disappointed at the time when that was launched. I think it was 2010. The companies that were involved were Google, Facebook, and Silicon Valley Bank. There were no British companies involved. There was no Imagination Technologies. There was no ARM Computing. The role models for a tech business weren't there, let alone the next point. And I think what we've seen then is there's a female cohort of big companies coming through. They feel to me like they're 5 years behind the underlying cohort. And then it almost feels to me like there's now this emerging cohort of Black and ethnic minority businesses, like really exciting young ones, that are 5 years behind that again. So it feels like that cohort is where we were in 2010. And so I do think that government can help and support and nurture these cohorts the same way it did with the underlying group, by constantly moving the spotlight down and making sure that there's enough support and infrastructure and nurturing and just actually awareness of these businesses to bring them through. I mean, I still go to talk to certain groups of people where they say, oh, aren't all Black businesses hair care products? It's more than that. And it's like, but there's no awareness of that, right? So I think a lot of it is the role models coming through, but government can also do a good job by making sure it keeps moving down to the next cohort and the next underrepresented group, in the same way that it should be pushing its view out of London and into the regions and getting investment out to the wider UK.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, the idea of wider inclusion, that obviously there's lots of areas of underrepresentation. We've had a question from one of the audience about that, from someone called Julian John, who's from Delsey, is a Welsh company. And how can tech businesses, specifically startups, embrace diversity and inclusion, specifically realizing the potential of individuals from all backgrounds, including race, gender, age, disability, educational achievement? Obviously, you guys have a specific, underrepresentation sort of issue here. There is, I think, a wider issue as well, isn't there, across the tech sector, of inclusion across all sort of levels. Janet, is that something, again, you could comment upon?
Yes, I'd love to. Am I back in okay?
Yes, you are. We can hear you great.
Thank you, and apologies about earlier.
No
I
worries.
agree, this is definitely very close to my heart, and one of the biggest things for me is about education, and it's also about recognizing privilege. Now, people sometimes, when they hear the word privilege, in all senses of the word, be that white privilege, be that ableism, be that various forms, shy away from it a bit and feel as if it's almost very, like it's aggressive, when actually we all have privileges of some kind, regardless, and it's just different levels. So if we as part of the tech community can actively take the time and take the step back to say, let me learn about the challenges and the opportunities that people from a neurodiverse background can bring to my startup or my organization, or better yet, when I'm doing my market research and customer segmentation, let me actively make sure I am looking at a broad sense. I think this is one of the easiest but most difficult ways at the same time of, getting the more inclusive tech startups that we are looking for. And, so many reports have already been written with a myriad of recommendations that people can take. And for me, unfortunately, they haven't been implemented, but we keep, commissioning new ones with the same results. So I think that's, one of the things there for me.
Interesting stat which is released today from the Future Fund, the British Business Bank has released it, which has its, a set of statistics about where the funding has gone so far. 236 million pounds worth of convertible loans approved for 252 companies. I think that surprisingly, it seems to be being spread out, certainly outside London. 45% of funding to companies outside London, but also 80% of management teams are mixed gender and 50% of management teams are mixed ethnicity. Is that a figure that would surprise you? Is that something you recognise?
It doesn't surprise me. I think I want to dig into the numbers still, because you have like, well, there's only 3 that are all female founder groups, for example, and the idea of what is a founder group. So I was a single founder, and quite a lot of people I know are single founder groups, and we do, like, certainly the ones, if you're in London, 40% of Londoners weren't born in London, so that it's a great melting pot of lots of different types of people from different areas, pushing to make things better. And I think that I want to understand the mixed groups and understand how that was understood, because I think it's the same. I think only 12 businesses were all BAME management teams and only 3 were all female. So it's to dig into the numbers, I think, is quite important, and similar on the sort of regional spread too. But it's a good start.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Janet, speaking to someone, as I said, from within a large organisation like Accenture, do you think that we should be trying to both promote the startup community, if you like, to encourage more take-up from the BAME community into starting businesses? Or should we be concentrating perhaps on some of those large organizations and getting better representation into those? Or is it both at the same time? I mean,
I'm a big advocate of trying it all at once and succeeding. And as a really quick example of this, Accenture have launched the Accenture Entrepreneur Network and very recently, and that encourages the various side hustles that people within the organization have. And as part of that, the first call we had a few weeks ago had more than 200 colleagues from the UK and Ireland region joining. And on looking at the pictures of the participants, I'd say at least Accenture is already quite a diverse organization, but at least half of the 200 plus people on there, their profile pictures were brown or black or of ethnicity. And it was amazing to see that, because people like this have been given the opportunity to, be encouraged to be in a company like Accenture globally doing some, great technology projects and implementations, whilst also being encouraged to, on how to balance their side hustles turned into startups. Alongside that for me is the two being able to merge quite nicely. So, yeah.
Tolulope, obviously with Coders of Colour, you were there working primarily with young coders, with individuals. Is there also a role which you could see extended out from there to actually starting to help create some of these tech startups and then to get them, into revenue stages and to work perhaps on a larger and larger scale?
Yes, 100%. I mean, if they have the coding skill, then they're probably going to be great for any startup in this day and age. So, having a startup or being a co-founder is great. And I think we've talked a lot about entrepreneurship, but just having your bog standard job at Accenture or any other large corporation is also really important, and may also be a route that young people want to go down. And since we don't have much time left, I just want to touch on that a little bit, because there may be some people that I saw some messages about HR and things like that. And I think in order to be more inclusive, you need to initially reflect on yourselves as a company and how exactly you want to bring people in. And a lot of HR teams are quite homogenous themselves. They do have like young females of a certain race and a certain age bracket. And so looking at that, looking at how there could be implicit biases and things like that can also probably affect change on a wider scale, because if all companies are realizing, that some of the ways that they are working implicitly exclude people, then it will help just in general in the future. And there are loads of grassroots organizations for all the different types of diversity. I'm sure there's an organization already doing work in that way. And so working with them directly will definitely help you affect change much faster, because they already know what they're doing.
Just looked at the clock and I realised we've got 4 minutes left. I don't know where on earth that's gone, because we've got a lot of questions as well. Perhaps if I could just make a few points from those. Paula has said that the differently abled are always missed out in inclusion discussions. And again, it's just how can we broaden this into looking at underrepresentation in its broader sense. Also that Erica's making the points of, we need to offer the balance of VC funding coming in as well. How do we get companies across that sort of hurdle where they get into that sort of scaling territory where suddenly for any company, risk is mitigated to some extent. So I think there's a lot of things we could continue to talk about. I would like to ask you all though, if you had, just to try and close this session, if you had one thing, I was going to give you all three, but I don't think we might have fit that in. If you had one thing that you think would be an ask, if you like, ways to redress the balance, to get better representation, and that could be an ask of government, regional, local, national government, of individuals, of investors, of industry. What would be one thing? I mean, again, I know, Tom, you've got various recommendations of some of the stuff you've already sort of, purported. What would your one thing be?
I think if you're going to talk wider at people in general, I think, I remember listening to Megan Smith, who was the first CTO, I think, of the US, and employee number 3 at Google. And one of the things that she said was that, look, if you're a business that are purporting to sell to the wider public, then your company must reflect who you sell to. So it's a business requirement to be diverse in terms of your workforce, because how else could you possibly relate to your customer base? And I think it's as simple as that. So in everything that you do, from both in hiring through to raising money, you've got to think that there's a whole customer set out there, so you need to be reflective of it. And similarly, if you're an investor, there are whole customer sets of people out there, so you should be requiring of your investee companies to also be reflective.
And Tolulope, what would your one thing be, do you think?
My one thing would be to work with grassroots organizations and really seek out, whether it's putting jobs on job boards or just working with events. There are definitely people supporting those that are underrepresented already, and it's for people, whether it's government or whoever, to just take the step of actually working with those people directly.
Okay, very good point. Janet, you get the last word. So what's your one thing, would you say?
Lovely, thank you. And I echo all that. My one thing hones in specifically on people from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds in tech, as well as those from the lower socioeconomic demographic. I pick those two because they are the ones most disproportionately affected by the current pandemic. And going forward, if we are going to recover properly and build the correct tech, and including them to make sure that going forward, these disparities aren't in society and thereby impacting them more. I want us to make sure that we are, overrepresenting them in the businesses that are being started today, as a result of the pandemic to help us move forward.
That's a great note to end on there, Janet. I wish we had time to talk about the new report released today from the World Economic Forum on the diversity, equity and inclusion toolkit they've just released, but we've literally run out of time, so we'll have to come back to that next time. Thank you, Tolulope, Tom, Janet, for sparing the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.